This project was released as part of the project InclusiveGameLab, which was funded by the German Ministry of Research, Technology and Space, and realized by the University of Applied Sciences Cologne and the Department for Youth Media Culture. In today's presentation, we will talk about accessibility versus difficulty. Difficulty does not exist in games, at least not in the shape dominating the discourse. Instead, games have barriers, and perceived difficulty is the result of people interacting with the game and its barriers. But because people are so vastly different, it's impossible to determine the difficulty resulting from interaction with these barriers. So, the difficulty of a game is relative to the person playing. This is why difficulty modes usually don't really work. What some gamers may perceive as easy may be hardcore for others, and vice versa. Factors to consider are the experience level in a certain genre or gaming overall, familiarity or lack thereof with a specific technology, like for example the button layout for a controller, and of course sensory, cognitive and motor impairments. Now, if you watch the introductory talk on disabilities, you will remember that a disability is the result of a mismatch between a person and their environment. This means that game designers can actively disable players if the environment they've designed, the game world, its rules and presentation is not accessible. And this brings us to an important distinction: intended versus unintended barriers. Intended barriers are barriers that the game developers have implemented to create challenges, for example, a complex environment to navigate in a platformer, hostile NPCs, or limited resources the player has to manage. Unintended barriers, on the other hand, are not a core part of the game experience. They are a result of a mismatch between an individual and the environment. This is why the accessibility versus difficulty discourse completely misses the point. Gamers often argue that certain games are supposed to be difficult, and that accessibility options reduce the difficulty for players using them. While it's true that accessibility does impact difficulty, it does so by removing or at least reducing these unintentional barriers while preserving as many of the intentional barriers as possible. That means if accessibility is implemented well, it actually allows players to get as close as possible to experiencing the original version of the developers, including the challenges. It levels the playing field, or to put it simply, it lets players face a challenge that suits them. This process is all about finding the right balance, but as I said in the beginning, the same game can be easy for one person but impossible to play for another. This means it's difficult, if not impossible, to offer a balanced play experience for everyone. Implementing options to adapt the game to a person's individual capabilities is a good way to mitigate this problem. Let players who don't have quick reflexes slow down the game speed, provide optional hints for puzzles, or let players skip certain parts of the game if they cannot overcome the barriers you've built there. And this is where difficulty modes can be useful if they are done right. If you offer predefined difficulties, provide useful information on what players can expect when choosing them. It starts with the name of the mode. Avoid patronizing phrases like baby mode, as well as non-descriptive terms like easy, balanced, or hard. As you've learned, these are not really useful because what's easy for one person is hard for another. Instead, give your players a rough idea of what the mode offers. For example, more and more games include a so-called story mode or explorer mode that focuses on the narrative experience and limits, or entirely removes gameplay revolving around combat. Baldur's Gate 3 offers such a mode and briefly outlines what it entails. a narrative experience, placing story before combat. Next, players should receive more information so they can make a meaningful decision. To return to the story mode idea, clearly communicate if this mode removes enemy encounters entirely, if it reduces their number, or if it just changes the balance in these encounters by making adjustments like resource allocation. For example, more HP for your characters, fewer for enemies. Even if you do both, it's very likely that your players still only have a vague idea on what to expect after all. They've never played your game and are still expected to make a decision that impacts the experience in such a profound way. So, if possible, allow them to change the difficulty setting throughout the game. If, in addition to these modes, your game offers a range of options to modify the experience, there's a good chance you will reduce the number of unintentional barriers significantly and allow as many players as possible to experience and enjoy your game. Let's summarize the key points of this presentation. Difficulty is the result of capability versus barrier. A disability is a mismatch interaction between capability and barrier, meaning that the barriers are not designed with consideration for the capabilities of certain people, so these barriers are difficult or impossible to overcome. Accessibility means avoiding an unnecessary mismatch between capability and barrier. This can be achieved through inclusive design thinking and accessibility options. These are some sources and links for further reading.